Hi there, I'm Beverly Carrier James now, and my father was Trooper Leo Webster Carrier, and he enlisted in the troop in 1927. Up to then, he was the salesman for Shell Oil. And all of a sudden he just remembered and found out that there was a depression coming and he was going to guard his family. And he went to the United Troop D, where he was all the time that he was in the troopers, but he had substations all over, which I can remember a lot of them. And I can remember when I was very little, and he would come home for his only night off. And of course he wanted to be with my mother, so he gave me the job of polishing his bullets. And I can even remember now, sitting at my little table, polishing the bullets. In this day and age they'd have a fit, but at that time, it was wonderful. It gave me something to do. For the Rough Riders, at first they were jumpers. And he got along very well with that, but then they decided to trick ride, and that was one of the things that he really enjoyed, teaching the horses to go at a certain pace, at a certain gait, and so then they decided to do the pyramid. So he had to rig up something to hold the horses together, and he had a chain running through their bridles so they couldn't move out of the pyramid stage. So that went along for 3 or 4 years, and then he finally got transferred, especially in the wintertime, to Camden. And he and Todd, they had the last horse patrol out of Camden. And we have pictures of them and with their heavy coats on, and they're standing next to their horses. And they were still beautiful horses. And his next, in the summer, he'd come back to Troop D to help with the horses. In the winter, he'd be pushed off someplace, and we'd have one night a week to go and visit. Oh, the guys nowadays have a wonderful time. We had him one day a week. Other time that he was in Homer. He was stationed in Homer for quite a while. And he had the open car at that point, and he was going around the camps, inspecting camps, and caught up with 2 fellows that were burglarizing the camp. And he had his dog, which he wasn't supposed to have, and he had trained the dog to be a guard dog. So he put the fellows in the car and told them to stay put. And one of them decided to go, and he said, "Take him." He did. The dog bit him, put him to the ground. Of course, that didn't go over very well with the heads of Troop D. But after a while, things calmed down, and once again, he was on the road again. He had motorcycle patrol, he had car patrol, horse patrol. I think he covered all bases. And he was in the milk strike, and he had his picture in the paper for helping that. And then he was in the troopers breaking up a still. And then he was considered a hero because he saved a young couple, not young, an old couple, in Fayetteville from a fire, and he had smoke inhalation, and he was in the hospital quite a while. And he managed to get hurt quite often, and he smashed a leg in an accident, and he was in the hospital for 9 months having the leg rebuilt, and then he was in a brace, so they couldn't put him on the road anymore, so he was on teletype. So we went to Oneida then, and he was on teletype, and was basically a 9 to 4 job where he had nights off, he could stay home.
What do you remember about visiting headquarters over in Oneida?
Oh, visiting headquarters when I was little was a fabulous thing, because I rode horses and Dad was teaching me to be a trick rider. So I was there, and I was everybody's little girl at that point. Most all the fellas up there wanted to help me, and Todd, he was really interested in helping me. And he would try to show me new tricks that they were doing, and of course I was very little, so I couldn't do them all, but I could do quite a few.
Now, Trooper Todd, he was part of the trick riders, right?
Yes.
The Rough Riders?
Yeah, he was a rough rider, and he jumped, and he did the whole gamut. He loved horses, as we all did. And he was like a second father to me. He was always trying to help me do this or help me do that. And he and my father designed my trick riding saddle, so they had it made. It was flat on the back with 2 handles, so I could do back drags and 101 different things.
There were what they called the field days over there at the headquarters grounds. You remember that?
Oh, yes, I remember it. It was a beautiful grounds. It was fenced in some areas where they could let the horses out. And someone was in the barn all the time to take care of the horses 24 hours a day and clean up after them. I don't remember now whether they had standing stalls or whether they had box stalls, but I'm inclined to think there were standing stalls, but I'm not sure about that. But the field days were something that the whole county looked forward to, because it was just like a fair. They had all different things going on. They had horses and jumping and trick riding, and I rode my horse trick riding there.
What did you do with your horse?
Well, I did a little of everything. I tried to copy the troopers. I did side drags and under drags and round the pommel and everything I could think of, and my horse would lay down, and I could stand on my head on her neck.
And how old were you at this time?
I was 6, probably 7. 5, 6, and 7 was my prime years. But every year I rode with them.
What was your horse's name?
Pardon?
Do you remember your horse's name?
Oh, yes, Flapper Fanny.
That's beautiful.
That was her name. And she was a pinto. She was not a pony. She was a little bit bigger than a pony, but she was not a full horse. But she was an old horse. And she learned so well that she had to keep the cadence and go around at a certain speed and not break that speed, because I had no hands on her. I mean, she was doing it on her own as she was taught to do. So it was interesting.
John Perry, who was the son of Lieutenant Perry over at Troop D, recently wrote a book called Troop D Memories, and in it he has a chapter on the field days at Troop D. They were spectacular. In this chapter, he remembers you by name, saying, I remember on several occasions seeing Beverly Jean Carrier, a child who lived on the Syracuse side of Wampsville, ride her pony through a hoop of fire.
Oh, yes.
You're remembered by name after all those years by somebody you made quite an impression on back then.
Well, it was kind of unusual, especially unusual for a horse to go through fire.
With a 6-year-old on it.
Yeah, but it was, my father made it out of pipe with standard on the bottom, and it was a complete square, which was wrapped with burlap, soaked in gasoline, and then they lit it. And you don't want to wait too long to get going because it drops. And one time at the field day there, it started dropping as I went through, and my hair was getting on fire. And Dad ran over and put out the fire, and then he went and got me a cap like the aviators used to wear, and made sure that I put that on for the next time. But it was a combination of wonderful people that all worked together, and everybody was a friend. And I was the little girl of the group, and everybody would pat me on the head, and I was their kid too, so it was wonderful. So,
Well, thank you very much for sharing your memories with us.
you're more than welcome. It's been fun kind of remembering. Of course, I'm 83, and it's hard sometimes to remember, but when you start thinking about different things come to mind. But it's just certain names. Now, the one that I remember that I was very fond of, and I thought his name was Hughes, was the aviator.
Yes.
That he was so nice, and he was going to take me flying, but then he crashed, and it was so heartbreaking. And I remember it every time I go by the barracks to see his monument there. He was a friend, and you remember. The rest of them are gone, but you don't remember that much.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us.
You're more than welcome, and I thank you for remembering my dad.